They say marriages die in silence. Mine died with a group text and a Pilates playlist blasting through our bedroom wall at 6 in the morning. I'm Ethan Cole, 41 years old, civil engineer by trade, and apparently the last person in Cleveland to know my wife was screwing my best friend. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days calculating load-bearing capacities, stress points, and structural integrity. Yet I'd missed every warning sign that my own life was about to collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. "Ethan, you need to pick up more Greek yogurt," Vanessa called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that particular tone she'd perfected over our 15 years of marriage, the one that suggested I was slightly less competent than our golden retriever, Max. "Sure thing," I replied, not looking up from my coffee and the morning paper. The sports section was depressing as usual. The Browns were having another stellar season, which is to say they were playing like they'd never seen a football before. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her power suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. At 38, she still turned heads, and she knew it. Auburn hair pulled back in a sleek bun, makeup applied with surgical precision, and that smile she reserved for clients and neighbors, the one that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me anymore. "I'll be late tonight," she announced, checking her phone. "Big presentation for the Morrison account. Tasha and Priya are helping me prep." Tasha and Priya. The holy trinity of suburban gossip, disguised as a book club that had never actually read a book. They met twice a week, ostensibly to discuss literature, but actually to dissect everyone else's business like forensic pathologists. I grunted, turning the page. The obituaries were more uplifting than the sports section. "Did you hear me, Ethan? Morrison account, Tasha and Priya, late night. Got it." She sighed, the kind of theatrical exhale that suggested I was failing some invisible test. "Sometimes I wonder if you even care what happens in my life." I looked up then, meeting her green eyes. "I care, Nessa. I always care." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance that I'd used her old nickname. She'd been Vanessa exclusively for the past 2 years, claiming Nessa sounded unprofessional. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her purse and keys. "Alex needs to be at soccer practice by 4. "Don't forget." "When have I ever forgotten?" She paused at the door, and for a moment I thought she might say something real, something honest. Instead, she just shook her head and left. The house felt bigger when she was gone, like a museum after closing time. I finished my coffee and headed to work, where at least the concrete and steel made sense. Materials had predictable properties. Load limits were clearly defined. When something was about to fail, there were warning signs you could measure and quantify. If only marriages came with structural engineering reports. My office at Henderson and Associates was a testament to organized chaos. Blueprints covered every surface, coffee stains marked important deadlines, and my desk looked like a paper recycling center had exploded. But I knew where everything was, and more importantly, I knew how everything worked. "You look like hell," Ray Kowalski announced, dropping into the chair across from my desk with his usual lack of ceremony. Ray was my closest friend at work, a structural engineer with the soul of a philosopher and the mouth of a dock worker. He was also the only person who could get away with insulting me before 9 a.m. "Good morning to you too, sunshine." "Seriously, man, you look like you haven't slept in a week. Vanessa keeping you up with her nocturnal activities?" I shot him a look. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ray held up his hands. "Easy there, Tiger. I just meant her work schedule. She's been burning the midnight oil lately, right? Big corporate PR campaigns and all that?" "Right, yeah, she's been busy. Must be nice having a wife who's passionate about her career." Ray's tone was carefully neutral, but I caught the subtext. His own wife had left him 2 years ago, claiming he was emotionally unavailable and married to his job. The divorce had hit him hard, but he covered it with jokes and cynicism. "It's something," I agreed, turning back to my computer screen. The morning passed in a blur of calculations and conference calls. I was reviewing stress analysis reports for a new downtown office building when my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Dad, can you pick me up early from school? Coach moved practice to 3:30. I checked the time. 2:15. I could wrap up the Peterson project review and still make it with time to spare. On my way, I texted back. Alex was waiting by the main entrance when I pulled up, his soccer bag slung over one shoulder and his backpack over the other. At 16, he was starting to look more like a man than a boy. My height, Vanessa's eyes, and thankfully, my sense of humor. "How was school?" I asked as he climbed into the passenger seat. "Same as always. Boring teachers, terrible food, and Sarah Mitchell still won't talk to me. Maybe try actually talking to her instead of staring from across the cafeteria." "I don't stare. Son, I've seen you stare. You stare like a tourist at the Grand Canyon." Alex laughed despite himself. "Thanks for the pep talk, Dad. Really building my confidence here." We drove toward the soccer fields in comfortable silence. This was our time, the 20 minutes between school and practice, when Alex would actually talk to me about real things instead of grunting monosyllabic responses to questions about homework and chores. "Dad?" His voice was quieter now, more serious. "Yeah? Is everything okay with you and Mom?" The question hit me like a sucker punch. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the steering wheel, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. "What makes you ask that?" "I don't know. You guys just seem different lately, like you're roommates instead of married people." Out of the mouths of babes. My 16-year-old son had noticed what I'd been trying to ignore for months. "Marriage is complicated, Alex. Sometimes people go through rough patches. Are you getting divorced?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "We're not planning on it, no." "Why? Are you worried about that?" "A little. Jake's parents got divorced last year, and it was really messy. He had to choose sides and everything." I pulled into the parking lot by the soccer fields and turned to face my son. "Alex, listen to me. Whatever happens between your mom and me, you will never have to choose sides. You're our son, and we both love you. That will never change." He nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Kids always know more than adults think they do. "Now go kick some ass out there," I said, ruffling his hair. "Language, Dad," he grinned, grabbing his gear and jogging toward the field. I watched him warm up with his teammates, marveling at how easily he moved, how naturally confident he was with his friends. When had I lost that? When had everything become so complicated and heavy? My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Vanessa. "Running even later. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The drive home took me through our neighborhood, a collection of brick bungalows and tree-lined streets that had seemed perfect when we'd moved in 10 years ago. Now it felt like a fishbowl, where everyone knew everyone else's business and privacy was just a polite fiction. I waved to Mrs. Geller, who was watering her flowers and undoubtedly cataloging who was coming and going at what times. She waved back with the enthusiasm of someone who had gossip to share but no immediate audience. Mr. Klein was washing his car in his driveway, the same blue Honda Civic he'd been driving since retiring from the police force 5 years ago. He nodded as I passed, the kind of acknowledgement that said, "I see you, I know you, and I'm keeping track." Home felt even emptier than it had that morning. Max greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm, tail wagging like he hadn't seen me in years instead of hours. At least, someone was happy to see me. I fed the dog, grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, and settled into my recliner with the remote. The evening news was its usual parade of disasters and political theater, but it was background noise while I tried to process Alex's question. Were Vanessa and I getting divorced? 6 months ago, I would have said absolutely not. We had our problems, sure, but we were solid. We were partners. We were building a life together. Now I wasn't sure what we were building, or if we were building anything at all. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. Ray's name appeared on the screen. "What's up?" I answered. "Poker night," he announced without preamble. "My place, 8 o'clock. Bring money you can afford to lose and stories you can afford to tell." "I don't know, Ray. It's been a long day." which is exactly why you need to get out of that house and remember what it's like to be a human being instead of a domestic appliance. Ray had a point. When was the last time I'd done something just for me? Fine. But I'm not staying late. Famous last words, see you at 8. Ray lived in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures. It was aggressively masculine in the way that only a recently divorced man's apartment could be. The poker table was set up in what used to be the living room, surrounded by mismatched chairs and illuminated by a hanging light that looked like it belonged in an interrogation room. The usual suspects were already there when I arrived. Tommy Chen from the fire department, Mike Rodriguez, who taught high school history, and Jake Stevens, a lawyer who specialized in divorce cases, a fact that felt uncomfortably relevant tonight. "Look what the cat dragged in," Tommy called out, dealing cards with practiced efficiency. "We were starting to think you'd forgotten how to have fun." "Fun is overrated," I replied, taking my usual seat and grabbing a beer from the cooler. "Spoken like a truly married man," Jake laughed. "How's Vanessa? Still climbing the corporate ladder in those designer heels?" "She's fine. Busy, but fine." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Busy is good. Keeps them out of trouble. Or gets them into it," Tommy muttered, studying his cards. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. These were good guys, friends I'd known for years, but lately I felt like there was a wall between us. Like they knew something I didn't, or were carefully not saying something they thought I should know. "Ante up, gentlemen," Ray announced, tossing chips into the center of the table. "Tonight's theme is brutal honesty and questionable life choices." We played for an hour, the conversation flowing as freely as the beer. Tommy talked about his latest dating disaster, Mike complained about his students, and Jake regaled us with stories from his practice that made marriage sound like a contact sport. "You know what I don't understand?" Jake said during a break between hands. "How people can live with someone for years and not really know them. I had a client last month, married 15 years, thought everything was fine. Turns out his wife had been having an affair for 2 years, had a whole secret life he knew nothing about." "How'd he find out?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Anonymous email. Someone sent him photos, hotel receipts, the whole 9 yards. Poor bastard was devastated." "Who would do something like that?" Jake shrugged. "Could be anyone. Jealous friend, guilty conscience, someone who thought he deserved to know the truth. Point is, the signs were probably there all along. He just didn't want to see them." I thought about Vanessa's late nights, her new friends, the way she'd been dressing differently lately. More attention to makeup, new perfume, clothes I'd never seen before. "Your deal," Ray said, sliding the cards across the table to me. I shuffled mechanically, my mind elsewhere. "Ray, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "How did you know?" "With Karen, I mean. How did you know it was over?" The table went quiet. Ray leaned back in his chair, considering his words carefully. "It wasn't one thing," he said finally. "It was 1,000 little things. The way she stopped laughing at my jokes, how she'd find excuses not to be home, the way she'd light up when her phone buzzed, but only when I wasn't supposed to see it." "But you tried to save it." "I tried everything. Counseling, romantic getaways, grand gestures. But you can't save something when only one person wants to save it. What would you do differently?" Ray was quiet for a long moment. "I'd have paid attention sooner. I'd have asked the hard questions instead of pretending everything was fine. And when I finally knew it was over, I'd have handled it on my terms instead of letting her control the narrative. I dealt the cards, but my heart wasn't in the game anymore. By 10 o'clock, I was down $50 and ready to go home." "You sure you're okay to drive?" Ray asked as I gathered my keys. "I'm fine, just tired." "Ethan." He put a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever's going on, you don't have to handle it alone. You've got friends." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The house was dark when I got home, Vanessa's car nowhere to be seen. I checked the time, 10:30 p.m. Even for a big presentation, that seemed late. I was brushing my teeth when I heard the garage door open. Vanessa's heels clicked across the kitchen floor, then up the stairs. She appeared in the bathroom doorway, looking slightly disheveled but trying to hide it. "How was poker?" she asked, starting to remove her jewelry. "Fine. How was the presentation?" "Long, complicated, but I think we nailed it." She was avoiding my eyes, focusing intently on her earrings. In the mirror, I could see a small stain on her blouse that hadn't been there that morning. "That's good," I said, rinsing my toothbrush. We went through our nighttime routine like actors in a play, each of us hitting our marks but not really connecting. She showered while I checked my email. I read while she did her skincare routine. We said goodnight without looking at each other. I lay in the dark, listening to her breathe, wondering when we'd become strangers sharing a bed. Outside, a dog barked, and somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. The message was simple: "You deserve to know the truth." Below it was a photo that made my blood run cold. Vanessa and Bryce Hamilton, my best friends since college, locked in an embrace outside the Marriott downtown. The timestamp showed today's date, 7:30 p.m. While I was playing poker and worrying about our marriage, my wife was with my best friend. I stared at the photo until my eyes burned, then set the phone on the nightstand with hands that weren't quite steady. Game on. I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay in the dark next to my cheating wife, staring at the ceiling and listening to her breathe, wondering how long this had been going on and how many people knew about it before I did. Bryce Hamilton, my college roommate, best man at my wedding, godfather to my son. The guy who'd helped me move into this house, who came to our barbecues and birthday parties, who'd been like a brother to me for 20 years. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Vanessa cheating was devastating, but somehow predictable. We'd been drifting apart for years. But Bryce? That felt like a knife between the ribs. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make coffee. The kitchen felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. How many times had Bryce sat at this table, eating Vanessa's cooking, joking with Alex, all while planning to destroy my life? My phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. "There's more. Meet me at Denny's on Euclid at 7 a.m. if you want to know everything." I stared at the message, weighing my options. It could be a setup, some kind of elaborate prank. But the photo had been real, and whoever sent it knew things they shouldn't know. At 6:45, I left a note for Vanessa, saying I had an early meeting and drove to Denny's. The restaurant was nearly empty, just a few truckers and night shift workers grabbing breakfast before heading home. A woman in her 30s waved me over to a corner booth. She was attractive in a tired kind of way, with blonde hair that needed touching up and eyes that had seen too much. "You're Ethan," she said as I sat down. It wasn't a question. "And you are?" "Someone who knows what it's like to be lied to." She slid a manila envelope across the table. "My name's Carol. Carol Hamilton." The name hit me like a punch. "You're Bryce's ex-wife." "Ex as of 6 months ago. Turns out your wife wasn't his first affair, just his most recent." I opened the envelope with numb fingers. Inside were more photos, hotel receipts, credit card statements, and what looked like copies of text messages. "How long?" I asked. "Best I can tell, about 8 months. Maybe longer." Carol sipped her coffee, watching my reaction. "I hired a private investigator after I found some suspicious charges on our credit cards. Your wife's name came up a lot. The photos were damning. Vanessa and Bryce at restaurants, holding hands in his car, entering and leaving hotels. The text messages were worse, full of intimate details and plans for their future together." "Why are you showing me this?" Carol's smile was bitter. "Because I know what it's like to be the last to know. Because I spent 2 years thinking I was going crazy, that I was paranoid and jealous, while everyone else whispered behind my back." "Who else knows?" "Her friends, definitely. Tasha and Priya have been covering for her, providing alibis and excuses. Some of the neighbors suspect. Your friend Ray asked my sister about it last week." "Ray knew?" The conversation at poker night made more sense now. He'd been trying to warn me without coming right out and saying it. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Nothing. This is a gift, free of charge. What you do with it is up to you. I gathered the photos and documents, my hands surprisingly steady. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. If you're smart, you'll get a good lawyer and protect yourself financially. If you're lucky, you'll walk away with your dignity intact. Carol stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You seem like a decent guy. You deserved better than this. I sat in the booth for another 20 minutes, going through the evidence again. The timeline was devastating. Vanessa had been lying to me for months, creating elaborate stories to cover her tracks. The Morrison account presentation? There was no Morrison account. She'd been at the Marriott with Bryce while I was home worrying about our marriage. By the time I got to work, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them yet. I was going to be smart about this, strategic. If Vanessa wanted to play games, I'd show her how games were really played. You look like you've seen a ghost, Ray said, appearing in my office doorway with 2 cups of coffee. Something like that. I took the coffee gratefully. Ray, can I ask you something? Shoot. If you knew someone was being cheated on, would you tell them? Ray sat down heavily, his expression grim. That's a loaded question. It's a simple one. No, it's not. Because if you tell them and they don't believe you, you lose a friend. If you tell them and it destroys their marriage, you're responsible for that. If you don't tell them and they find out you knew, you lose a friend anyway. So what would you do? I'd hope they'd figure it out on their own, and I'd be there to help pick up the pieces when they did. I nodded, understanding. Thanks for being there. Always, man, always. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of phone calls and meetings, but my mind was elsewhere. I was planning, calculating, thinking 3 moves ahead like a chess player. At lunch, I drove to Bryce's gym. He'd opened Hamilton Fitness 5 years ago with a loan I'd co-signed, turning a run-down warehouse into a successful business. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd helped finance the place where he was probably planning his future with my wife. The gym was busy, full of the usual crowd of fitness enthusiasts and people trying to work off their lunch. Bryce was in his element, moving between machines and offering encouragement to his clients. At 42, he was still in excellent shape, all muscle and confidence and easy charm. He saw me and broke into a grin, the same smile he'd been giving me for 20 years. Now it made my stomach turn. Ethan, what brings you to the Temple of Sweat and Pain? Thought I might finally take you up on that membership offer. I lied smoothly. Fantastic. It's about time you started taking care of that engineer's body. All those hours hunched over blueprints can't be good for your back. He clapped me on the shoulder, the same casual gesture he'd made 1,000 times before. Now it felt like mockery. How's Vanessa? He asked, and I watched his face carefully for any tell. She's great. Busy with work, but great. How's Monique? A shadow crossed his features. We're taking some time apart, working through some issues. Issues. That was one way to put it. I'm sorry to hear that. You guys seemed solid. Yeah, well, sometimes things aren't what they seem, you know? The casual way he said it, the complete lack of shame or guilt, made my hands clench into fists. But I kept my expression neutral, friendly even. I should get back to work, I said, but I'll definitely think about that membership. You do that. And Ethan? Thanks for being such a good friend all these years. It means a lot. I drove back to work in a rage so pure it was almost cleansing. The bastard was actually thanking me for being a good friend while he was screwing my wife. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. But anger wouldn't help me now. I needed to be cold, calculating, methodical. I needed to be an engineer. That afternoon, I made a series of phone calls. First to a lawyer Jake Stevens had recommended, then to a private investigator Carol had mentioned, and finally to a friend who worked in IT security. I need a favor, I told Marcus Webb, my former college roommate who now ran a cybersecurity firm. I think someone's been accessing my personal accounts without permission. That's serious stuff, Ethan. You want me to run a security audit? Something like that. Can we meet tonight? I'll buy dinner. Sure thing. How about that steakhouse on West 25th, 7 o'clock? The rest of the day crawled by. I went through the motions of work, but my mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning my next moves like a general preparing for war. At home, Vanessa was in full domestic goddess mode, cooking dinner and humming while she worked. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and relaxed, probably because she'd spent the afternoon texting with her lover. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. "Productive. Yours?" "Good. Quiet. I caught up on some paperwork and had lunch with Tasha." Another lie, delivered with practiced ease. According to Carol's timeline, she'd been at Bryce's apartment from noon to 3. Alex bounded into the kitchen, still in his soccer uniform from practice. "Mom, can I go to Jake's house tonight? We're working on a history project." "Of course, honey. Just be home by 10. "Thanks. Dad, can you give me a ride?" "Actually, I have a dinner meeting tonight." "Can your mom drop you off?" Vanessa's head snapped up. "A dinner meeting? With who?" "Marcus Webb. Some IT security stuff for work." She relaxed visibly. "Oh, okay, I can drop Alex off." The fact that she was relieved I'd be out of the house told me everything I needed to know about her plans for the evening. Marcus was already at the steakhouse when I arrived, a laptop bag beside his chair and a beer in his hand. He'd gained some weight since college but still had the same sharp eyes and quick smile that had made him popular with professors and students alike. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks, you always were a charmer." We ordered steaks and got down to business. I showed him some of the evidence Carol had given me, careful not to reveal too much about the source. "This is sophisticated stuff," Marcus said, studying the printouts. "Whoever gathered this information knew what they were doing. Phone records, credit card statements, location data from social media posts. It's all legal, but it takes skill and resources. Can you help me understand what I'm looking at?" "Sure. But first, tell me what you really need, because this isn't about cybersecurity, is it?" I met his eyes. "My wife is having an affair. I need to know how deep it goes and how to protect myself." Marcus nodded slowly. "I figured it was something like that. Okay, here's what I can do. I can help you secure your personal accounts, monitor your digital footprint, and make sure you have copies of everything important before anyone tries to delete or hide evidence. Is that legal? As long as we're talking about jointly owned accounts and devices? Yes. You have every right to access information that belongs to you." We spent the next 2 hours going through my digital life with a fine-tooth comb. Marcus showed me how to set up monitoring software, how to create secure backups of important documents, and how to protect myself from having my own accounts compromised. "One more thing," he said as we prepared to leave. "Whatever you're planning, be smart about it. Don't do anything that could be used against you later." "What makes you think I'm planning anything?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Because I know you, Ethan Cole. You're not the type to just roll over and take it. You're going to fight back, and when you do, it's going to be spectacular." I drove home through the quiet streets of my neighborhood, past the houses where normal families were settling in for the evening, watching TV and helping kids with homework. I envied them their simple problems and uncomplicated lives. The house was dark except for the porch light. Vanessa's car was in the garage, but she wasn't in the living room or kitchen. I found her in our bedroom, already in her nightgown and reading a book. "How was dinner?" she asked without looking up. "Fine. Marcus sends his regards." "That's nice." "Alex is at Jake's house. I told him to call when he needs a ride home." "Good." I went through my nighttime routine mechanically, brushing my teeth and changing into pajamas, while my mind raced with plans and possibilities. When I climbed into bed, Vanessa was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay in the dark, listening to her breathe, and realized that everything I'd thought I knew about my life had been an illusion. My marriage, my friendships, my place in the community, all of it built on lies and betrayals. But I wasn't the same man who'd discovered those photos 12 hours ago. That man had been naive, trusting, willing to be a victim. This man was different. This man was going to fight back. And when I was done, Everyone would know exactly who Vanessa and Bryce Hamilton really were. The game was just beginning. 3 days later, I was ready to make my first move. I'd spent the weekend playing the role of oblivious husband while gathering intelligence. Vanessa had worked both Saturday and Sunday, which according to my new private investigator meant she'd spent 6 hours at Bryce's apartment on Saturday and met him for lunch and an afternoon hotel visit on Sunday. The PI, a former cop named Detective Sarah Chen, had been worth every penny. Professional, discreet, and thorough, she'd already provided me with enough evidence to bury both of them in divorce court. But that wasn't enough anymore. I wanted them to feel the same humiliation and betrayal they'd put me through. "You're playing with fire," Ray warned me over coffee Monday morning. I'd filled him in on everything, and he was worried I was going too far. "They started the fire," I replied. "I'm just adding fuel." "Ethan, I get it. I really do. But revenge has a way of backfiring. Trust me on this. This isn't revenge, it's justice." Ray shook his head, but didn't argue further. He knew that look in my eyes. Phase 1 began that afternoon. I'd hired 3 actresses through a friend who worked in local theater, each one young, attractive, and willing to play a role for $500 cash. Their job was simple: create evidence that Bryce Hamilton was a serial cheater who couldn't be trusted by anyone. The first actress, a redhead named Jennifer, called Bryce's gym at 2 p.m., asking to speak to him personally. She claimed to be a former client who'd moved to Chicago, but was back in town for a few days and wanted to reconnect. The conversation was flirty, suggestive, and loud enough for his staff to overhear. The second actress, a brunette named Michelle, showed up at the gym an hour later, asking for Bryce and claiming to be his special friend from out of town. When told he was with a client, she left a sealed envelope with her phone number and a note that said, "Call me when you can get away from your wife. I miss you." The third actress, a blonde named Amanda, was the masterstroke. She arrived at the gym just as Bryce was locking up, pretending to be surprised to see him. "Bryce! Oh my God, I can't believe it's really you." From my car across the street, I watched the confusion on his face as this beautiful woman threw her arms around him like they were long-lost lovers. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" he asked, trying to disentangle himself. "Very funny," Amanda laughed, loud enough for the other people in the parking lot to hear. "After everything we shared in Miami, you're going to pretend you don't remember me? I think you have me confused with someone else. Bryce Hamilton, right? The guy who promised to leave his wife for me?" Her voice was getting louder, more emotional. The guy who said I was the love of his life. A small crowd was gathering, gym members and passers-by drawn by the drama. I could see Bryce's face turning red as he realized how this looked. "Ma'am, I've never been to Miami and I don't know you." "Don't you dare lie to me!" Amanda's voice broke with perfectly rehearsed emotion. "I gave up everything for you. I left my job, my family, everything." She stormed off, leaving Bryce standing in the parking lot with a dozen witnesses who'd just heard what sounded like a very messy affair gone wrong. I drove home grinning. By tomorrow, half the neighborhood would know that Bryce Hamilton was apparently juggling multiple women and breaking hearts across the country. But I was just getting started. That evening, Vanessa came home in an unusually good mood, humming as she cooked dinner and actually engaging Alex in conversation about his day at school. "You seem happy," I observed. "Just a good day at work. Sometimes everything clicks, you know?" What had really clicked, according to Detective Chen, was a 2-hour afternoon session at the Marriott with her lover. But I just nodded and smiled. "That's great, honey. You deserve to be happy." The next morning, I implemented Phase 2. Using a combination of fake social media accounts and carefully crafted anonymous tips, I began spreading rumors about Bryce's history with female clients. A fake Yelp review claimed he'd made inappropriate advances during personal training sessions. An anonymous post on the neighborhood Facebook group suggested he'd been seen with multiple women at local hotels. A carefully worded email to the Better Business Bureau raised questions about his professional conduct with female customers. None of it was technically libel, since I never made direct accusations, just raised questions and concerns. But the cumulative effect was devastating. By Wednesday, Bryce's gym was fielding angry phone calls from concerned husbands and boyfriends. The beauty of the plan was its subtlety. Each piece of evidence seemed to support the others, creating a web of circumstantial proof that was almost impossible to refute. How do you prove you didn't have an affair with a woman in Miami when that woman doesn't actually exist? Thursday morning, I was in my office reviewing blueprints when my phone rang. Bryce's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, buddy," I answered, injecting false cheer into my voice. "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Of course. What's going on?" "Someone's been spreading rumors about me. Nasty stuff about affairs and inappropriate behavior with clients. My business is getting hurt, and I can't figure out who would do something like this." "That's terrible, Bryce. Any idea who might have it in for you?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." "You haven't heard anything, have you? Any gossip in the neighborhood or anything?" I paused, as if thinking. "Well, now that you mention it, Mrs. Geller did say something about seeing you with different women at restaurants around town, but I told her that was probably just business meetings or friends." "What exactly did she say?" "Just that she'd seen you with several different women over the past few months and they looked pretty cozy." "But you know Mrs. Geller. She sees romance everywhere." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Bryce, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here. Listen, if anyone asks, you know I'm going through a rough patch with Monique, right? We're separated, so if I've been seen with other women, it's not cheating or anything inappropriate." "Of course not. I hope you guys work things out." "Thanks, man. I appreciate you having my back." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Bryce was rattled, which meant the plan was working. But the real test would come that evening. I'd arranged for Amanda, the blonde actress, to show up at Bryce's house at 7 p.m., just as he was getting home from work. This time, she'd be even more dramatic, claiming he'd gotten her pregnant and abandoned her. The performance was Oscar-worthy. I watched from down the street as Amanda confronted Bryce in his driveway, her voice carrying across the quiet neighborhood. "You can't just ignore me, Bryce. This is your baby, too." "I don't know you," Bryce shouted back, looking around frantically at the neighbors who were starting to come out of their houses to watch the show. "Don't lie to me. We were together in Miami, and now I'm pregnant, and you won't even return my calls." "I've never been to Miami. You're crazy." "I'm crazy? You're the one who promised to marry me and then disappeared." Mr. Klein, the retired cop, had come out of his house and was watching the drama unfold with professional interest. Mrs. Geller was on her porch, phone in hand, probably recording everything for posterity. Amanda played her part perfectly, breaking down in tears and begging Bryce to do the right thing, before finally storming off, leaving him standing in his driveway with his reputation in tatters. By Friday morning, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with gossip about Bryce Hamilton and his apparent string of broken hearts and abandoned women. The gym's phone was ringing constantly with cancellations, and several of his female clients had switched to other trainers. But the real masterstroke came Friday afternoon, when I received a call from Monique Hamilton. "Ethan, I need to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere private?" We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from the prying eyes of our neighborhood. Monique looked exhausted, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and her eyes red from crying. "I don't know who else to turn to," she said, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. "Everyone's talking about Bryce and these other women, and I don't know what to believe anymore." "What do you mean? The rumors, the stories about affairs and pregnant women? Is any of it true?" I leaned forward, projecting concern and sympathy. "Monique, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but there might be some truth to the rumors." Her face crumpled. "What do you know?" "I've seen him with other women." I didn't want to say anything because I hoped it was innocent, but given everything that's been happening. I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the photos Detective Chen had taken of Bryce and Vanessa together, carefully cropped to hide my wife's identity. "This was taken last week," I said. "I'm sorry, Monique. I really am." She stared at the photos, her hands shaking. "Who is she?" "I don't know. Just someone I saw him with at a restaurant." It wasn't technically a lie. I had seen him with someone at a restaurant. The fact that it was my wife was beside the point. Monique broke down completely, sobbing into her hands while I sat there pretending to comfort her. I felt a twinge of guilt. She was an innocent victim in all this, but it was necessary collateral damage. "What should I do?" she asked. "You should protect yourself. Financially, emotionally, legally. If Bryce is having affairs, you need to document everything and make sure you're not left holding the bag." "Can you help me?" "I don't know how to do any of this." "Of course. Whatever you need." I gave her Detective Chen's number, along with the name of a good divorce attorney. By Monday, Bryce would be facing a legal battle that would make his current problems look like a minor inconvenience. That evening, I came home to find Vanessa pacing in the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear. "I don't care what people are saying," she was saying. "I know you're not like that." She saw me and quickly ended the call. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just some drama with a friend. Nothing important." But I could see the worry in her eyes. Her lover's reputation was being destroyed, and there was nothing she could do about it without exposing their affair. "I'm going to take Max for a walk," I announced. "Okay, dinner will be ready in an hour." I walked Max through the neighborhood, nodding to neighbors and listening to the gossip that followed in my wake. The Bryce Hamilton scandal was the biggest thing to hit our quiet street in years, and everyone had an opinion. "Always seemed too good to be true," Mrs. Geller confided as I passed her house. "All that charm and those muscles. I told my Harold, men like that are always trouble." "You never really know someone," I agreed solemnly. "That poor Monique, 20 years of marriage, and this is how she finds out what kind of man she married." "It's tragic. At least she has good friends like you and Vanessa to support her through this." If only she knew. Back home, Vanessa was quiet during dinner, picking at her food and checking her phone every few minutes. Alex, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered about his day at school and his plans for the weekend. "Can I go to the movies with Sarah Mitchell tomorrow night?" he asked. "Sarah Mitchell?" Vanessa looked up from her phone. "I thought she wouldn't talk to you." "That was last week. We're talking now." "That's great, son," I said. "Just be home by 11. "Thanks, Dad. You're the best." At least someone in this family still thought so. After Alex went to his room to do homework, Vanessa and I sat in the living room, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "Ethan," she said finally. "Yeah? If you ever heard rumors about me, you wouldn't believe them, would you?" "You'd talk to me first?" The question caught me off guard. Was she fishing for information, or was she genuinely worried about her own reputation? "Of course I'd talk to you first. We're married. We trust each other." She nodded but didn't look convinced. "It's just that people can be so cruel sometimes. They spread lies and rumors without thinking about the damage they cause." "Is there something you want to tell me, Nessa?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought she might confess everything. Instead, she just shook her head. "No, nothing important." That night, as we lay in bed, I could feel the tension radiating from her body. She was worried, scared, probably wondering if her secret was about to be exposed. Good. Let her worry. Let her feel a fraction of what I'd been feeling for the past week. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Chen. "Subject met with divorce attorney this morning. Things are about to get interesting." I smiled in the darkness. Phase 2 was complete. Bryce's reputation was in ruins, his marriage was over, and his business was hemorrhaging clients. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Phase 3 would be the real test, the moment when everyone would finally see Vanessa and Bryce for what they really were. And this time, there would be no hiding, no denial, no escape. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. The annual Riverside Community Charity Gala was scheduled for Saturday night at the Marriott downtown, the same hotel where my wife had been conducting her affair. The irony was so perfect, it felt like destiny. I'd been on the organizing committee for 3 years, helping to coordinate what had become the neighborhood's biggest social event. This year's theme was Building Stronger Communities, and the proceeds were going to fund new playground equipment for the local elementary school. It was also going to be the perfect stage for my grand finale. "Are you sure about this?" Ray asked as we reviewed the final details in my office Friday afternoon. I'd brought him into my confidence about the evening's plans, and he was having second thoughts. I'm sure. Ethan, once you do this, there's no going back. Everyone will know, including Alex. That gave me pause. My son would be at the gala with us, expecting a normal evening out with his parents. Instead, he was going to witness the public destruction of his family. Alex deserves to know the truth, I said finally. He's already asking questions. Better he hears it from me than from neighborhood gossip. Ray shook his head but didn't argue further. He knew I'd made up my mind. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Detective Chen had provided me with a complete timeline of Vanessa and Bryce's affair, including dates, times, and locations. I'd cross-referenced this with Vanessa's calendar and discovered that she'd used the Charity Gala committee meetings as cover for at least 6 of their rendezvous. While she'd been telling me she was planning fundraising strategies, she'd actually been in hotel rooms with my best friend. Tonight, that betrayal would be exposed in front of the entire community. I'd arranged for the hotel's AV system to malfunction during Vanessa's speech. She was scheduled to thank the major donors and announce this year's fundraising total. Instead of her prepared remarks, the screens would display a slideshow of photos and documents chronicling her affair. Marcus Webb had helped me set up the technical aspects, ensuring the presentation would override any attempts to shut it down quickly. The photos would be tasteful, no nudity or explicit content, but damning nonetheless. Hotel security footage, credit card receipts, text message screenshots, and GPS data from their phones would tell the story of their betrayal in clinical detail. You realize this will destroy her career too, Ray pointed out. She should have thought of that before she decided to screw my best friend. Saturday evening arrived with all the pomp and circumstance the organizing committee had planned. The hotel ballroom was decorated with white linens and gold accents, round tables arranged around a small stage where the evening speakers would address the crowd. I arrived with Vanessa and Alex, playing the role of devoted husband and father. Vanessa looked stunning in a black cocktail dress, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She was nervous about her speech, checking her notes repeatedly and practicing her opening lines under her breath. If only she knew what was really coming. You look beautiful, I told her as we made our way to the reception area. Thank you. I just want everything to go perfectly tonight. I'm sure it will be memorable. The cocktail hour was a parade of familiar faces from our neighborhood and the broader community. Mayor Davidson was there with his wife, along with several city council members and local business leaders. The guest list read like a who's who of Cleveland's suburban elite. Bryce arrived fashionably late, looking handsome in his tuxedo, but noticeably alone. Monique had filed for divorce on Wednesday, and the news had spread through the community like wildfire. He was trying to maintain his usual confident demeanor, but I could see the strain around his eyes. Ethan! He approached our table with a forced smile. Great turnout tonight. It really is. The committee outdid themselves this year. Vanessa, you look lovely as always. My wife blushed prettily, but I caught the meaningful look that passed between them. Even here, surrounded by hundreds of people who knew us both, they couldn't help themselves. Thank you, Bryce. I'm sorry to hear about you and Monique. These things happen. We're trying to keep it civilized for everyone's sake. What a joke. There was nothing civilized about what he'd done to his marriage, or what they'd both done to mine. Alex was seated between Vanessa and me, looking uncomfortable in his dress shirt and tie. At 16, he was old enough to sense the undercurrents of adult drama, but young enough to be confused by what he was picking up. Dad, why is everyone acting so weird tonight? He whispered. What do you mean? I don't know. It's like everyone's pretending to be happy, but they're actually mad about something. My son was more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. Sometimes adults have complicated problems, I said carefully, but don't worry about it. Just enjoy the evening. Dinner was served at 7:30. Chicken cordon bleu, roasted vegetables, and rice pilaf. The conversation at our table was stilted, everyone trying too hard to act normal while avoiding the obvious tension between the separated Bryce and the apparently happy Cole family. Mrs. Geller, seated to my left, was in her element, dispensing gossip and commentary with equal enthusiasm. "I still can't believe all those stories about Bryce and those other women," she said, loud enough for half the table to hear. 20 years of marriage, and Monique never suspected a thing. "People can be very good at hiding their true nature," I replied, catching Vanessa's eye across the table. "Still, you'd think there would have been signs. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, unexplained absences." Vanessa's fork clattered against her plate. "Maybe we shouldn't gossip about people's private lives," she said tightly. "Oh, honey, it's not gossip when it's public record," Mrs. Geller replied cheerfully. "Monique's divorce filing listed adultery as the cause. Multiple affairs, according to what I heard. Bryce's jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might snap. The rumors I'd planted had taken on a life of their own, growing and mutating as they spread through the community. By now, he was supposedly the neighborhood's answer to Don Juan, leaving a trail of broken hearts and abandoned women in his wake. At 8:30, Mayor Davidson took the stage to welcome everyone and introduce the evening's speakers. The program would include remarks from the school principal, the head of the Parks Department, and finally Vanessa, who would announce the fundraising total and thank the major donors. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor said, "it's my pleasure to introduce someone who's been instrumental in making tonight possible. Please join me in welcoming Vanessa Cole, chair of our fundraising committee." Vanessa rose from her seat, smoothing her dress and checking her notes one final time. She kissed my cheek, a gesture that would have seemed loving to anyone watching, and made her way to the stage. "Thank you, Mayor Davidson," she began, her voice clear and confident. "When we started planning this event 6 months ago, our goal was to raise $50,000 for new playground equipment at Riverside Elementary." The audience murmured appreciatively. It was a worthy cause, and everyone in the room had children or grandchildren who would benefit. "I'm thrilled to announce that thanks to your generosity, we've exceeded that goal by nearly $20,000. Applause filled the ballroom. Vanessa was beaming, clearly in her element as the center of attention. "I'd like to thank our major sponsors," she continued, starting with Hamilton Fitness, whose owner Bryce Hamilton has been a tireless supporter of community initiatives. She gestured toward Bryce, who stood and waved awkwardly. The applause was noticeably more subdued than it had been earlier in the evening. "I'd also like to thank the Marriott for hosting us tonight, and for providing the perfect venue for our committee meetings over the past several months." This was my cue. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to Marcus. "Go." "The success of tonight's event is really a testament to what we can accomplish when we work together as a community," Vanessa continued. "When we put aside our personal interests and focus on what's best for—" The screens flanking the stage suddenly flickered, and Vanessa's prepared slideshow disappeared. In its place, a new presentation began, starting with a title slide that read, "The Real Story, a Timeline of Betrayal." Vanessa stopped mid-sentence, turning to look at the screens with confusion. The audience murmured, thinking it was a technical glitch. The first photo appeared, Vanessa and Bryce entering the Marriott together, timestamp clearly visible. March 15th, 2:30 p.m. "What is this?" Vanessa said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom. The second slide showed them leaving the same hotel 3 hours later, Bryce's hand on the small of Vanessa's back in an unmistakably intimate gesture. The murmurs in the audience grew louder as people began to understand what they were seeing. "Turn it off!" Bryce shouted, jumping up from his seat. But the presentation continued relentlessly. More photos, more dates, more evidence, hotel receipts charged to Bryce's credit card, text messages between them discussing their meetings, GPS data showing their phones in the same location during times when Vanessa had told me she was working late. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. People were pulling out their phones, taking pictures of the screens, recording everything. Vanessa stood frozen on the stage, her face pale with horror. "This isn't what it looks like," she said weakly. But the evidence was overwhelming. The final slide was a calendar showing the correlation between Vanessa's committee meetings and her actual hotel visits with Bryce. Every lie, every deception, laid out in clinical detail. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, standing up and walking toward the stage. My voice carried clearly in the stunned silence. "I think my wife has something she'd like to share with all of you." All eyes turned to me as I climbed the steps to join Vanessa on stage. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "Not like this." "When then, Vanessa?" "When were you planning to tell me about your affair with my best friend? When were you going to admit that every committee meeting, every late night at the office, every business dinner was actually a rendezvous with the man who stood up at our wedding?" The ballroom was dead silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped what they were doing to watch the drama unfold. Bryce was pushing through the crowd, trying to reach the stage. "This is insane," he shouted. "Those photos are fake." "This is some kind of setup." "Are they fake, Bryce?" I asked, my voice calm and controlled. "Is the GPS data fake? Are the hotel receipts fake? Are the text messages where you tell my wife how much you love her and can't wait to start a new life with her fake?" He stopped in his tracks, his face flushing red. "That's what I thought," I continued, turning back to the audience. "For 8 months, these two people have been conducting an affair behind my back, using community events and charitable work as cover for their betrayal. They've lied to me, to Monique Hamilton, to all of you, and to themselves." Alex was staring at me from our table, his face a mask of shock and confusion. This was the hardest part, knowing that my son was learning the truth about his mother in the most public way possible. "The money you donated tonight will still go to the playground equipment," I said. "The children of our community shouldn't suffer because of the moral failures of the adults who are supposed to be role models." I turned to Vanessa, who was sobbing openly now. "Did you want to say anything to our friends and neighbors? Any explanation for why you destroyed 2 marriages and betrayed everyone who trusted you?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "Then I think we're done here." The aftermath was chaos. People were shouting, some demanding explanations, others expressing outrage and sympathy. Hotel security was trying to restore order, but it was too late. The damage was done. Bryce tried to approach me as I left the stage, but Mr. Klein, the retired cop, stepped into his path. "I think you've done enough for one evening," he said firmly. I made my way back to our table, where Alex was sitting in stunned silence. "Dad?" he said quietly. "Is it true? Is Mom really—" "Yes, son, it's true." He nodded slowly, processing information that no 16-year-old should have to deal with. "What happens now?" "Now we go home and we figure out how to move forward." Vanessa had disappeared, probably to the ladies' room to compose herself. I didn't go after her. She'd made her choices, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. The drive home was silent except for the sound of Alex crying quietly in the back seat. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her makeup streaked and her perfect evening ruined. "I hope you're satisfied," she said as we pulled into our driveway. "I'm not satisfied, Vanessa. I'm devastated. But at least now everyone knows the truth. You've destroyed my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for." "No, you did that. I just made sure people knew about it." She got out of the car and ran into the house. A few minutes later, I heard the guest room door slam. Alex and I sat in the living room, the weight of the evening settling over us like a heavy blanket. "I'm sorry you had to find out like that," I said. "How long have you known?" "About a week." "Why didn't you just divorce her quietly? Why did it have to be so public?" It was a fair question, and he deserved an honest answer. Because what they did wasn't just about me, Alex. They used the community, our friends, our neighbors as cover for their lies. They made everyone complicit in their deception. People had a right to know what kind of people they really are. He nodded slowly. "What's going to happen to us?" "We're going to be fine. It's going to be difficult for a while, but we'll get through it together." "Is Mom going to leave?" "Probably. But that's her choice." We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing the wreckage of our family. "Dad?" Alex said finally. "Yeah? I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." What she did was wrong. It was the validation I needed to hear, even though it broke my heart that my son had to be the one to give it to me. Sunday morning brought a parade of phone calls, text messages, and visitors. The story of the charity gala disaster had spread through the community like wildfire, and everyone wanted to know more details or offer their support. Vanessa stayed in the guest room all morning, only emerging to pack a suitcase and load it into her car. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Tasha's house. I need time to think." "Take all the time you need." She paused at the door, looking back at me with something that might have been regret. "I never meant for it to happen like this," she said. "But you meant for it to happen." She didn't deny it. After she left, Alex and I spent the day fielding calls and visitors. Mrs. Geller brought a casserole and stayed for an hour, pumping us for details about the timeline of the affair. Mr. Klein stopped by to offer his support and to let me know that if Bryce caused any trouble, I should call him immediately. Ray came over in the afternoon with beer and pizza, and we sat on the back porch while Alex was at a friend's house. "So how do you feel?" he asked. "Empty, relieved, angry, sad, all at the same time. Any regrets about how you handled it?" I thought about it for a long moment. No. They deserved what they got. And Alex? How's he dealing with it? Better than I expected. He's a strong kid. He gets that from his father. Monday morning brought news that Bryce had closed his gym indefinitely, citing personal issues and unforeseen circumstances. The rumors and scandals had finally taken their toll, driving away too many clients to keep the business viable. Vanessa's employer was less understanding. By Tuesday, she'd been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review of her professional conduct. Apparently, using company time and resources to conduct an affair was frowned upon in the corporate world. Detective Chen called Wednesday morning with an update. "It's over," she said. "Bryce Hamilton has left town." Packed up his apartment and drove away sometime Monday night. Word is he's headed to Florida to stay with a cousin. What about the divorce proceedings? Monique's attorney is handling everything in absentia. She'll get the house, his remaining assets, and probably alimony. He's not fighting any of it. And Vanessa? Still at her friend's house, as far as I know. But I think you can expect divorce papers soon. She was right. The papers arrived Friday afternoon, delivered by a process server who apologized for the intrusion. Vanessa was seeking a no-fault divorce with joint custody of Alex and an equitable distribution of assets. I called my attorney immediately. "She's not going to get joint custody," Jake Stevens assured me. "Not after what happened at the gala. The judge will take her conduct into consideration, especially since Alex is old enough to express his preference about where he wants to live." "What about the assets?" "We'll fight for everything we can. The affair will work in your favor, particularly if we can show she spent marital assets on it." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my office reviewing structural plans when Ray knocked on my door. "You've got visitors," he said, grinning. I looked up to see Alex standing in the doorway with a young woman I recognized as Sarah Mitchell. "Dad, I'd like you to officially meet my girlfriend, Sarah." "Girlfriend?" I stood up, extending my hand to Sarah. "It's nice to meet you officially." "Thank you, Mr. Cole. Alex talks about you all the time. All good things, I hope." "Mostly," Alex grinned. We chatted for a few minutes about school and their plans for the weekend. Watching Alex with Sarah, seeing how happy and confident he was, I realized that despite everything that had happened, some things were turning out better than I'd expected. After they left, I sat back down at my desk and looked out the window at the city skyline. For the first time in months, I felt like I could see clearly, like the fog of deception and betrayal had finally lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news about your divorce. You deserve better. Hope you're doing well. Carol." I smiled and typed back, "Thanks, I'm doing fine." And for the first time in a long time, that was actually true. That evening, Alex and I grilled burgers in the backyard and talked about his plans for senior year. He decided he wanted to study engineering like his old man, which both surprised and pleased me. "I want to build things that last," he said. "Things people can count on." That's a good philosophy for engineering and for life. As we cleaned up the dishes, he asked the question I'd been expecting. Have you heard from Mom? Not directly. Her lawyer calls my lawyer, but we haven't spoken. Do you miss her? I considered the question carefully. I miss the person I thought she was. But that person turned out to be someone I never really knew. He nodded, understanding more than a 17-year-old should have to. I don't miss the fighting and the tension, he said. The house feels more peaceful now. It does, doesn't it? Later that night, after Alex had gone to bed, I sat in my recliner with a beer and thought about everything that had happened. The revenge had been complete and devastating, exactly as I'd planned. Vanessa's reputation was destroyed, her career was over, and her lover had fled town like a coward. But revenge, I'd learned, was a cold comfort. It didn't heal the betrayal or restore the trust that had been broken. It didn't bring back the 15 years of marriage I'd thought were real, but turned out to be built on lies. What it had done was give me back my self-respect and shown my son that some things were worth fighting for. It had cleared the air and revealed the truth, no matter how painful. And sometimes that was enough. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Ethan, it's Monique. Bryce's ex-wife sounded tired but determined. Hi, Monique. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. I wanted to call and thank you. Thank me for what? For having the courage to expose the truth. I know it cost you, but it saved me from wasting any more years on a man who didn't deserve them. I'm glad something good came out of it. I'm moving to Phoenix next month. Fresh start, new job, new life. But I wanted you to know that what you did at the gala, that took guts. A lot of people would have just quietly filed for divorce and let the lies continue. The lies were poisoning everything. They had to stop. Well, they have now. Take care of yourself, Ethan, and that son of yours. He's a good kid. After we hung up, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The collateral damage from my revenge hadn't been entirely negative. Monique was free to build a new life. Alex had learned that his father wouldn't be a victim, and I had reclaimed my dignity. The cost had been high. My marriage, my best friend, my place in the community as I'd known it. But sometimes, the price of truth was worth paying. I finished my beer and headed upstairs, past the guest room that still smelled faintly of Vanessa's perfume, to the master bedroom that was finally mine alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new possibilities. The divorce would be finalized, custody arrangements would be made, and life would move forward. But tonight, for the first time in months, I would sleep peacefully, knowing that the lies were over and the truth had finally set me free.